Welcome, listeners and viewers, to another episode of Beyond Circumstances, the podcast for coaches that want to learn how to help their clients move beyond circumstances, whatever those circumstances may be. And with me today, I have Don Eisenhauer. Hello, Don.
Hello, Shiri. Great to be here.
It's great to have you. So I just told you earlier that I don't remember when and how we met. It just seems to me that we've been in touch for years,
I
and
do
we've had.
remember
Okay, then share.
I was doing a training in the UK, and one of the participants of the training was a graduate of yours. And she reached out to you and told you about me, and then you reached out to me, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. And we've had so many conversations since then. And after October 7th, you were so generous and you did a free workshop on grief for ICF Israel coaches. And so, Don, for those who don't know you yet, please say a few words about who you are and what you do.
Yes, my name is Don Eisenhauer. I am from Pennsylvania, United States, and I run an organization called Coaching at End of Life. I'm sure we'll get into that more as we go along, what that is.
Yep. So in the show notes, we will have your website address and how to find you and get in touch with you. And if it's okay, we're going to talk about end of life. But before that, I'd like to touch on grief. So, from your experience, what is one thing that people get wrong when they try to cope with grief or process grief?
When people are dealing with grief on their own, when they've experienced a loss, what I notice that people often get wrong is they think something is wrong with them if they're hurting and crying, if they're still grieving over a month or over 3 months or over a year. They think they should be over it. And the reality is, grief is something that we never get over. And it takes a different amount of time for each person, each individual, to be able to even move forward. But we get it all mixed up and think if I'm crying and I'm sad, then I'm not doing well. When the reality is, very often it's just the opposite. It's when we are crying, it's when we are facing the emotions and letting them out. That's when we're doing really well.
And also, grief is very subjective. There isn't a right way or wrong way to grieve, is there?
There is not. We're each going to grieve in different ways. But what is important, what is universal for everyone, is that, and this is what we often get wrong, we think that we shouldn't be mourning anymore. But what's really important is to know the importance of and the great value of mourning. That's mourn, mourning.
Yeah. And I love that you brought mourning into the conversation so early. So could you say a few words about the difference between grieving and mourning?
Yeah, that's another thing that people get wrong, is they think grief and mourning are the same thing. Many people use those words interchangeably. Oh, I'm grieving, I'm mourning, same thing. But the reality is those two words are not with the same meaning. And it's really important that we understand the difference between those two words. Grief is what we feel on the inside when we're experiencing a loss. We feel the sadness. We feel the loneliness. We feel the guilt. We feel the anger. But it's not enough just to grieve our losses. We also need to mourn the losses. Mourning, rather than just what we feel on the inside, mourning is the outward expression of what we feel on the inside. We mourn when we cry. We mourn when we tell our story and talk about our loss. We mourn when we do different rituals. We go to the graveside or we light a candle in somebody's name. And the reason that it's so important to mourn our losses, to let those feelings out, is that if we don't intentionally let them out, they're always going to find their own way to come out. And whenever they find their own way to come out, it's never pretty. Okay? It's, as a matter of fact, pretty dangerous and pretty rough when it comes out on its own. When it comes out on its own, it does so through fits of anger or through depression, or it comes out on its own through other physical illnesses that are caused as a result of grief that's not being mourned, that's not being let out. And so, you see, if we don't intentionally let it out, it's going to come out on its own, and the consequences are not very good when that happens.
And it's really okay to create your own mourning rituals. I mean, you can lean into family rituals or cultural rituals, but you can do your own as well.
Absolutely. And you know what's important to you, and I know what's important to me, and the best way to do that mourning. There's no right or wrong way to let it out. It's whatever's going to help us. For some, it is crying. For some, it is talking and telling their story over and over again. For some, it is rituals that they'll go through. I had one man who was a client of mine. He was old school. He did not cry. He would not talk about his wife who died very much. But every day he would go out and chop wood. And that was his way of releasing, of letting out what was on the inside. He was out in the rain. He was out in the snow. He just knew the importance for him of mourning by chopping wood. That
To
might
be
not be
okay,
what you do, Shiri.
no, and it really depends. Like, I wanted to ask you if it would be okay to invite you to share your morning ritual or rituals for clients, because we both do end of life coaching and we've lost clients.
Hmm.
Do you have rituals?
Rituals that I go through to
Yeah.
deal with the loss when I'm dealing with clients.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do a couple of things. Sometimes it's going out to a park and going for a walk. I mean, that's part of what I do to release. Another thing that I do is I watch TV. What I mean by that is I cry. I cry over commercials. I cry over sad TV shows. And I know that's just my way of releasing the time that I've been spending with my clients and the grief that builds up. You know, my wife and my daughter used to look at me funny. Now they just expect it. Oh yeah, that's you crying. It's not a big deal. So that's really a help for me. It's just a release. So I just let the tears flow and enjoy the show I'm watching.
I give myself permission to cry, and I have this closure conversation with my clients that pass on. I don't like to use the term pass on. Like, they die. That's what happens.
Hey, Di. And it's
I have
important
no
that we
idea if
say
that's,
those real words.
yeah, that's so important. And we're going to say something about that in a bit. So I have this conversation with them where I thank them for being in my life, and I kind of send them with a blessing, and I usually light a candle, and yeah, and and if I still need to cry, I cry. I cry until I don't need to cry anymore. But that conversation, that's the cornerstone of my morning ritual when it comes to losing clients. But let's say something about the language, because many times people use all of these words instead of using the word die. Person died. So why is it so
Yeah.
important that we use that term? We call a thing by its name.
Yeah. And we do that. People do that to try and soften it so it doesn't sound so bad. But the reality is we need to face the reality. We need to face this person is dead. They've died. And I don't mean to be insensitive in saying that. And there are some cultures for whom that's very difficult, and we need to use some other words. But most of the time, I want to help people to face the reality that their loved one has died. And using the words helps that.
One reframe that I've learned is very helpful is to say that the relationship hasn't died. The love hasn't died, because grief is an expression of love. You don't grieve, things that you didn't love and you weren't connected to. But the relationship is still there.
Yeah, that's great. I love the way you distinguish that.
Let's talk about end of life. When there
Okay.
is a death, that's now we're all going to die, that's true, but working with end of life clients, we're talking about the death that is closer on the timeline.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I've been asked whether there's a room for coaching at all, for the coach approach, when you're working with someone that is in dying stages. So what is end of life coaching all about?
Yeah. Let me just say, when I talk about end of life, I talk about it's like having two sides of one coin. You have one coin, but there are two sides to it. End of life is the coin, but the two sides are those who are dying and those who are grieving. So when I talk about end of life, I'm really talking about both of those. But specifically, when we think about somebody who is in the process of dying, end of life coaching is using those coaching principles that we've all learned, that we all know, the ICF core competencies, and to use them with these people who are facing end of life. And some people say coaching doesn't have any place for it. I say just the opposite. Coaching is the perfect model to use with the dying and with the grieving. Think about the skills that we learn there. The active listening. What people dealing with end of life issues, whether they're dying or grieving, need more than anything is somebody to listen to them, not somebody to tell them what to do, which is what most people try, not to try and fix them, which is what a lot do, not to try and make them feel better and tell them how they should be behaving, but simply listening and letting the client be the expert, which is what we do in coaching. But we need to do that all the more when it comes to end of life coaching. And all the principles, all the coaching principles, the core competencies apply in this way. We need to ask questions rather than tell. We need to make it a very safe place, building trust and safety. Make it really safe where they can cry if they want, where they can scream, where they can share anything that they want. It's those who know coaching who are the very best at end of life coaching.
I agree with you. Many times when I tell people that I am an end of life coach, their response is, "Oh, that must be so difficult." Do you get that?
I get that a lot. And sometimes it is difficult because we're facing all those emotions or we're encouraging our clients to face those emotions. But at the very same time, there is no greater privilege than to be able to be in the presence of someone who has just had a loved one die, or they're in the process of dying, or they are grieving a loss, and to be able to provide that safe place for them and to listen to them and to see the difference that it makes. Because I'll tell you, people over and over again say, I have no one who I can talk with. I have no one who will let me share. And as soon as I try to share my pain, they try to fix me and make me feel better right away. And that's not what they need.
I think I heard this from Stephen Jenkinson's. It says that we are living in a death-phobic society, and everything that has to do with loss and grief and death is so intimidating that we try to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Yeah, people
that's
don't want to talk about it. That's one
yeah.
of the reasons why people use all these different words, these euphemisms. I can't face the reality. I can't talk about death and dying. You know what people say? If I talk about it, it might happen to me. The reality is someday it will happen to us. We're all going to die. And the best thing we can do is talk about it and make it a reality and say, let's face it and see what this really means, rather than trying to put our heads in the sand like the ostrich, right? Puts the head in the sand. I don't want to face the world.
What we don't deal is going to deal with us. That's what I've learned.
Yeah,
So,
you're right. And I think we're in
you know,
a time and a day when people are experiencing loss more than ever.
I agree. It's coming at us so many directions, in so many shapes and forms.
Yeah.
During
Because
the
when we're
years,
talking about, oh, go ahead.
no,
Well, I
you
was going to
continue.
say, when we're talking about loss, it's important to say this too, that it's not just death losses that we need to mourn. It's also what I call living losses or non-death losses. When we lose a job, when we have a relationship that breaks, that somebody leaves a relationship, when we move to another place, when we experience a war, when we see our country not acting or behaving the way we want it to, when we're fearing the finances and the whole economic situation. We could just go on and on and on. And with everything that's happening in our world these days, people are facing loss more than ever. And it all needs to be mourned, not just grieved and felt on the inside, but faced and let out. Otherwise, we're going to see more and more consequences of that not happening. And I think we're already seeing that in broken relationships and in a lot of violence that's out there.
Yeah. I've come across two perspectives
Mm,
in that aspect. One
okay.
saying grief is grief, so the content change, but the process is the same. And another perspective that says, well, there's death, there's the loss of a person, and that's real grief. And then there are other changes and stuff like that, and that's just a part of life. So yeah, you want to acknowledge it, but move on. What do you think?
I don't think they're separate at all. I mean, they're certainly separate in how they happen, but I think whether it's a death loss or a living loss, they still need to be mourned. They need to be faced. You don't just move on. It's something that we need to process and deal with. Otherwise, you get those negative consequences in people's behavior and relationships. If we
I
want to
think it
live
bring
well,
it
then we need to mourn well.
for me. I think that dealing with death, talking about grief, and learning how to mourn, it's part of knowing how to live well.
Yeah, I agree. You said that those other things besides death are part of life. Well, death is part of life as well.
Yeah,
Loss is
yeah.
a part of life, but we need to learn to face it and not hide from it and run.
And I think that one thing that we have lost is the knowledge of how to die well, if that's even a thing. Like I've heard the concept of a good death. You've probably come across that as well. But
Hmm.
I think there's that death isn't just something that happens to us. It's also something that we do. Like when we're at that place, there's something that I think we're invited to actively do. And that's where coaching is so relevant. Really raising the awareness on how do you want to be at this point? What do you want to do? What's important for you? What are the values?
I
So,
agree. To have those conversations with the dying or with the grieving is so key. It's so important and so helpful for them. Having
and
coaching
also remember,
conversations with them.
yeah, and remembering that until a person is dead, they're alive with everything that means. Because I think that sometimes it's so easy from our place of fear when someone is at that stages of end of life to say, okay, they're dying. They're not really a part of the living. Okay. Accept the fact that you're dying. What does that mean? What does that mean to accept the fact that you're dying? Does it mean that you're giving up on life? I don't think so.
I think that's what enables us to live fully until the moment that we die. I always say hope is always a part of the process of coaching the dying, but hope comes in a lot of forms. But it's helping people to say, this is how I find hope, even as my body is dying, or as I'm declining and experiencing all these changes.
To take the conversation a different direction, not really
Okay.
different direction, but you supported coaches in Israel around grief, and you supported coaches in the Ukraine after the war started around grief. Can you say a few words about your experience? What did you come across? What was clear for you? Any insights that you had?
What I found is that it doesn't matter where we are around the world, everyone experiences loss and everyone needs to mourn. And different cultures handle it differently. But that doesn't change the fact that everything that we've been talking about over the last 20 minutes or so is true. And it's a reality. And what I found in a number of different countries, I've gotten to travel the world teaching this, and such a great privilege to do that. But what I found is that in many different places, many different countries, people will say, I've never shared these things with anyone. They just haven't, they live in cultures that are not safe to talk about it. And I saw the effects of it, of people who are really, really hurting and just longing for a coach, somebody who's willing to listen, someone who's willing to be present and to allow them to share anything they wanted about it. For some, it's a long process. I mean, you're experiencing that in Israel. They're experiencing that right now in Ukraine. And it means just continuing to walk that journey with them over and over. They don't get over it. They continue to need that safe place.
Because there is no end to it. It changes. But, I heard a quote a few years ago. This lady, she was giving a TED talk, and she said, we never move on from grief. We move on with grief.
Yeah, absolutely. Grief changes us.
It does.
Life isn't the same after experiencing loss. And it's not just that things are worse and that they're bad. There's also a lot of growth that comes through grief and through loss. We don't like to experience that, and we'd rather have it that we never lost. But the reality is we do lose, and there is growth as a result of it.
So I want to take us back to grief over things that are not directly connected with the death of a person. And you mentioned
Hmm.
a little bit, politics, what's happening in the world, what might be happening to your country. And that is grief that is very present. How can we make room for that in the coaching space? Because a lot of people won't associate the word grief or mourning to that because, it's too dramatic.
But it's still loss that we're experiencing because I used to feel peace in my world, and now I don't feel peace anymore. I see these wars taking place. I used to feel confident in what was happening through politics, and now I'm just really scared. Will I have enough money to live and to retire? When we're being a coach, when we're in the role of coaching, we're not choosing sides, we're not picking, we're not arguing, we're not talking about politics. We're talking about the experience of living in the midst of this world, in the middle of what's happening. And that's what people need, not to agree, not to challenge. They need somebody to listen and to use all of those coaching principles along with them.
So let's bring it to some practical tips. Let's say that we have, one of our viewers or one of our listeners is a coach, and
Hmm.
their coaching client just brought into the space grief. There was a loss. What can we say to a coach like that that's coming across that for the first time? What are some tips we can give that coach?
What I want to say to them is you're probably going to have the tendency of wanting to make your client feel better or to quick change the subject so they don't have to talk about it. And what I'd encourage them to do is just the opposite of that. Ask them, how does that make you feel? What is it like experiencing that loss? Can you identify what the feelings are? Okay, what are they? When do you feel them the most? And it's getting them to talk about it and to release it. Along with that, I'd say don't be afraid if they start to cry. Don't try to stop it right away. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. Just the opposite. Say your tears are beautiful. What do those tears represent? What stirred up those tears for you? And it's just inviting them to share and to go deeper with their experience and their emotions.
And it's okay to use that coaching curiosity because it's all about awareness. It's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
and the act of listening, it's listen for the feelings, listen for the emotions. It doesn't make it therapy just because they're crying and they have emotions.
so
Okay?
true.
Now if we try and go back and say, now where did they come from? And we deal with a lot of past things, okay, now we're getting into therapy. But that's not typically what our clients need. They just need us to be real and to invite them to share more of what those emotions are.
And what should we do if we as coaches we feel that we're struggling with that? It's something that we can't do.
Well, then refer them to somebody else who can face it.
Yeah. But I guess also be curious what's happening to you when there's someone else's loss in the space.
Yeah. Get some
Because
coaching yourself, get some
yeah,
supervision and to be able to process what it is that they're experiencing because they're not a help to their client if they can't go there with them, if they
true.
can't allow them to share that.
And if you as a coach, if you're struggling to go there with your client, doesn't mean you're a shitty coach. It might mean that you have some
That doesn't mean
unresolved
you're a
loss
bad coach.
issues. Yeah.
Exactly.
But then it might be that there's some losses in your life that you haven't named and you haven't given yourself permission to grieve and to mourn.
Exactly. I
Yeah. So
mean,
this,
we always, even as part of our intake, sometimes we find some clients who just, they're not the best match for us. And coaching is always doing what's best for our clients. And there are times when I've had some clients and I say, I'm just not a really good coach for you. There are things that are stirred up in my life, and I need to refer you to someone else because I want you to get the best help and the best support to help you move forward and to be able to live life well. And so the best thing I can do is refer you. And that's the same thing that's true when it's an end of life client.
what is something significant that you've learned from your end of life clients?
Oh, I've learned so much from my end of life clients on a regular basis. They teach me how to love well. They teach me how to make the most of every day. They teach me the importance of relationships and to be able to make the most of relationships that I have. They teach me not to waste time, but to make the most of every opportunity. I could just keep going on and on.
That resonates so much. It
Yeah,
is a privilege to do this work, and there's so
it
much
really
grace.
is. Yeah. The clients teach me those things, and those who are dying teach me those things as well. I love doing the end of life coaching, being with people who are dying, because they teach me the way I want to live life.
Me too. Don, it's been a pleasure having you, and time just
And
flies when you're having fun. And we
I've,
just had fun talking about end of life, death and grief and mourning. Imagine that.
yes, it is. That's a good topic to talk about.
It
And yes, the
is.
time went very quickly for me too.
So I want to invite our listeners and our viewers to find you online because you also do these 4 meeting free web workshops, and they are
Hmm.
amazing, and your
It's called
content is
Coach
amazing.
Yourself Through Grief.
Yes. And you have written some books,
Hmm.
and we will have all of that information. What hasn't been said yet? about end of life, grief, mourning.
What hasn't been said is thank you to you for having me on for this podcast, because I like to talk about this more and more, to talk about the importance of mourning, to talk about the importance of facing these end of life issues, and for coaches to allow your clients to do the same.
Thank you, Don, so much for saying yes and being a guest on this podcast.
Oh, my pleasure to be here. I appreciate you and all that you do, Shiri.
Thank you. Likewise. So thank you for joining us today. If you're a coach and you want to learn more about how to support your client through crisis, through life's hardest circumstances, tune into our next episode and look us up online for more content and training. And have a wonderful day wherever you are. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.